Our guide tonight through the world of special operations is our speaker, Rear Admiral retired Gary Rosholt. Gary spent 35 plus years of active and reserve military service as a U.S. Navy SEAL, retiring in 2015. Highlights of his career included assignments as a defense attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi and Deputy Commanding General for the Special Operations Command. Gary recently retired as the president of L3 Technologies Saudi Arabia LLC and corporate vice president of Middle East operations, where he was responsible for all companies in the Middle East. And so he also has a deep knowledge of that volatile region. So as always, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A, and as always, we'll use the same procedures we've had before. First, you can email questions to that website up there, or email inbox up there, ndbs.questions@gmail, and I will get those on my phone. Secondly, there are question cards on all your tables. If you have a question, you want to write it down, hold it up, and we'll have a runner to come pick up the card. And the website address, email address is on that card. And finally, we'll take a few questions from the floor if we have time. And I'll tell you in advance, we never have time to get to all the questions, so that's just a function of time available. If you do want to ask a question, hold up your hand. A runner will bring you a microphone because we are videotaping this. And we want to get your question on the microphone. So that's all the admin. Please keep those dates in mind for future programs. And with that, Admiral Rosholt, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Junior, for your kind introduction. I'm honored to be here tonight, and I applaud these great NDBS forums that bring together our respective service organizations, key allies, and especially the next generation of our military service members. I really enjoyed our hour of discussions in advance of this thing with all you in the back room to share my career perspectives and leadership perspectives and understand some of your concerns and where you're going, but thank you for your service to come. I'd also like to give a good plug to Jim and Diane. Really appreciate your podcast. I was there with Mark. A very relaxed environment, so hopefully I had a chance to kind of get that wet appetite for this forum. In the past, I was able to attend this great powers competition. I remember the Air Force presentation. We had a Navy presentation, so it's great to have a soft perspective on where we fit within that requirement. Before we start, I'd like to start with our soft truths. That's been part of SOCOM since its inception in 1987. Number one, humans are more important than hardware. People, not equipment, period. Number two, quality is more important than quantity. Number three and number four, soft cannot be mass-produced or created after emergencies occur. And finally, number five, which was added several years after SOCOM's creation, most special operations require non-soft support. We are a key member of the Joint Force and routinely require their support in our campaign and operations, as we'll highlight tonight. Here's my agenda for my presentation, starting with an overview of SOCOM and soft forces, a brief review of past and current campaigns that include the global war on terrorism, great powers competition, a brief review of the new national defense strategy, and SOF's role in those priorities. Finally, we'll review the current soft technology requirements and budgets. Here's a view of the Earth at night from space that are often used during SOCOM briefings. During the Cold War, we focused on those population-centric areas of Russia, the light areas of the map. I remember having to memorize the various Russian aircraft and ships, as one of our SEAL missions was to provide that indication and warnings of any of those threats that might be approaching our fleet. With the rise of global terrorism, we then focused on our efforts on the dark spaces, those remote and often ungoverned countries that became safe havens for terrorist and extremist organizations to organize, train, and plan their attacks. In today's threat environment, we are now required to address those full spectrum threats in both the light and dark areas of our Earth. In In the SOCOM mission statement, you can see our requirement to conduct global special operations as well as being part of a joint force. It also highlights our partnership with the interagency, allies, and partners in our operations and campaigns. I've highlighted the core missions that have become our most known over the past 2 decades during our campaigns in the Middle East: counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, direct action, and hostage rescue. The Special Operations Command was established in 1987 as a unified command during the Goldwater-Nichols Act. It is currently commanded by a 4-star admiral, now Admiral Mitch Bradley, with its headquarters in MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. There is a soft component within each of the services, starting from the left to the right after the SOCOM emblem. You've got the U.S. Army Special Operations Command, based in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They provide the Special Forces, otherwise known as Green Beret, Rangers, Special Operations Aviation, Civil Affairs, and PSYOPs. Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California provides SEALs and our combatant craft crewmen and craft, as well as our dry and wet submersibles. The Air Force Special Operations Command is based in Hurlburt Field, Florida. They provide special operation aviators and special tactics. Their main aircraft include the MC-130J, the CV-22 Osprey, and my favorite, the AC-130J gunship. The Marine Corps component was added to SOCOM in 2006 and is based in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and provides Marine Raiders. And finally, the Space Force is in the process of establishing a Special Forces or Space Force Special Operations Command. The total SOCOM force are about 70,000 people, or approximately 3% of our military force. When SOF were forward deployed, they were assigned to a Theater Special Operations Command, or TSOC, for command and control. These TSOCs are under the respective geographic combatant command and responsible for that SOF employment in the campaigns in that region. In addition to TSOCs, there are 2 other SOF organizations listed on this graphic: JSOC and JSOW. JSOC is a sub-unified command of SOCOM and is our force's premier counterterrorism and hostage rescue command. Their Tier 1 strike forces consist of the Army Delta Force and the Navy SEAL Team 6. JSOW is our Joint Special Operations University, which provides joint special operations courses for our SOF enterprise, key leadership courses for SOF pre-command and senior enlisted personnel, as well as orientation courses for the interagency and international SOF. In addition to the organization on this map, SOCOM also has SOF liaison officers embedded with other U.S. agency headquarters in Washington, D.C. and throughout the nation. They accept their counterpart LNOs in Tampa headquarters as well, so we've got a great coordination built into those LNOs, and we've got a growing cadre of foreign SOF partners also supporting us in MacDill headquarters. About 1 month after the 9/11 terrorist attack on America, Special Operations Forces were the first American troops on the ground in Afghanistan in that initial U.S. response against al-Qaeda and the Taliban regime that harbored them. That was a full spectrum response that included the Army Special Forces, Green Beret, partnered with Afghan militia, Navy SEALs, 75th Rangers, Delta Force, in direct action missions, raids, and targeting senior Taliban leadership. Over the next 2 decades, those missions would grow to include village stability operations and training Afghan special units. Building that partner counter-terrorist and Iraqi Special Operations Forces capability also expanded in Iraq. During the peak of OEF and OIF, there were more than 10,000 SOF in the Middle East. Neptune Spear, the JSOC operation to kill or capture Osama bin Laden in Pakistan, took place in May 2011. There were years and years of detailed intelligence collaboration and analysis by JSOC and all the intelligence agencies to help locate UBL to enable this highly successful operation. In addition to Iraq and Afghanistan, SOF forces at this time were also executing the global war on terrorism with our partnership in the Philippines and other operations in Yemen and Somalia. To support the joint force efforts to deter China, SOF has taken a global approach to that campaign. While the slide target circles help to focus your attention on Taiwan, SOF use those same circles to prioritize their efforts. While not centric in nature, those global bands were weighted to help identify the most impact our SOF forces and partnerships could have through exercise and partnerships. Obviously, the closer to Taiwan, the 10 ring, the more value that would have in deterrence. SOF is also identifying best ways to support the Joint Force in their strike planning to include potential deception operations as we provided during the Gulf War. As we're seeing our SOF components engage more and more with the parent services to strengthen and expand those opportunities to support them in their deterrence planning. Thanks to the winter storm that delayed this presentation, we're not able to briefly discuss the new National Defense Strategy that was released on 26 January. Please note that Department of War's SEAL, as the eagle is facing the tip of the arrows, versus the standard U.S. SEAL, where the eagle faces the olive branches away from the arrows as their desire to pursue peace. This document builds on the earlier national security strategy with the administration's focus on America first, peace through strength, and common sense. I would encourage our future NDBS programs to have presentations on both the NSS and NDS. However, I'll briefly address the soft role in the NDS, 4 priorities that matter the most for America's security, freedom, and prosperity. Starting at the bottom with number 4, supercharge the U.S. defense industrial base. SOCOM has always embraced the latest technology and opportunities to quickly get that technology fielded. Using their congressionally authorized special operations unique acquisition authorities and long-standing experimentation opportunities with industry, they can quickly evaluate technologies with actual operators. SOCOM has offered to expand some of their experimentation opportunities with their service as well. Another early soft adaptation is AI, as they've already conducted leading university seminars for their senior leadership to help build that acceptance and integration into the force. But the third priority, increased burden sharing with our allies and partners. That's been one of our core missions from inception. Our Army Special Operations Forces have always been working to build capacity and partnership with their foreign partners as well as surrogate forces. A great example of this strategic value was our early work with Ukrainian SOF before the Russian invasion. Having those personal relationships and understanding of their capabilities has helped us advise and assist their operations, even remotely, since we've been restricted from in-country support. Number 2, deterring China in Indo-Pacific. The earlier integrated deterrence efforts under the last NDS were certainly continued to support this. However, those efforts will now be focused more on the inner ring, with the Indo-Pacific region as being the priority for the administration. Our continued exercises and partnerships with other soft forces in that region will help them align with the U.S. and help counter any Chinese influence that they may be trying to bring. And finally, number 1, defend the U.S. homeland. This requirement includes securing our land borders, our maritime approaches, and our nation's skies. For soft requirements, it continues to emphasize counterterrorism and attacking narco-terrorists. After the President's designation of international drug traffickers and their distribution networks as terrorist organizations, that certainly enabled the impressive use of our soft forces and skills of find, fix, and finish that have been refined over the decades of global terrorist hunting. To highlight a few ongoing operations in our own hemisphere, 1, our attention to the drug boats. You notice after the President's designation as narco-terrorism as a priority of terrorist organization, that started relatively quickly. I do think that SOCOM was probably identified as the lead component commander to do that because it had the forces, the techniques, and the assets to do that very quickly after they identified those coming out, because once that announcement was made, you saw those video clips being publicly noticed. You also saw some different headlines. I'm sure the early ones were done by a Predator. We've seen news releases talk about AC-130 gunships taking out those aircraft. As the little birds were flying around down the Caribbean in preparation for something else, I think they probably had some strikes on these targets. So I'm sure there's been a variety of strikes that took out these drug-running boats. Early on, you probably noticed, some of these boats, there were survivors in the water. So those survivors, if they're still alive there, they were rescued at sea, brought to the ships, and brought ashore to their host country for their own trials and conviction in their own home country, not back to the United States. They recently also heard where, there was congressional concerns, and we had an incident where the drug boats, once it was initially attacked, they were continuing to salvage the drugs. They were continuing to go for their weapons, and hence they directed a second strike. As the Congress wanted a debriefing on that one with the actual footage, you had our chairman, who's also with a soft background. You had the SOCOM commander, hence thinking this was a soft-led organization, operation, Admiral Bradley, going to provide the testimony on that one. Remember that Admiral Mitch Bradley was also the JSOC commander just prior to his nomination and confirmation for the SOCOM command. So he was having years and years of attacking terrorists, fully understanding and working within the rules of engagement, and they do that quite well and very efficiently. So I think that's why once you saw that testimony on those closed-door congressional hearings, and he talked about concerns on that second strike were quickly alleviated, even though he had some political commentary on the side. Next, another bread and butter soft mission. Again, when you've got some sanctioned tankers or sanctioned oil. As you know, the UN and US have got sanctions either against Russian oil or Venezuelan oil, or the tankers that might be moving those. Hence, we've had some of these interdiction operations. Well, when I was younger, we were doing the, you had both compliant and non-compliant boarding. Non-compliant, you'd be climbing up alongside the ships with guns pointed, sometimes at anchor, sometimes in a harbor, and sometimes underway. These being commercial tankers, they've been pretty much non-compliant, but the thing that we also saw that this was in support of the Coast Guard, because again, we do not have the authorities under Title 10 to do these boardings, so we use some of the DHS authorities, and then the Coast Guards, even in other places in the Gulf, you'd have that LEDET supporting that assault for these VBSS, visit, board, search, and seizure. That's been quite successful, continues, and even if they sometimes get out of the Caribbean, I think I heard once where we had some SEALs parachute onto one of these tankers as it was trying to run away. Even sure there were some ships around it, they had some boats in the water in case they missed, but it's exciting to see what they do on that one, and even other nations are now taking actions against these illegal tankers and illegal oil shipments. And finally, again, the Operation Absolute Resolve. What an impressive thing that you continue to learn more and more about that. That was the U.S. effort to go in and arrest Maduro. Thank you. When you kind of see the proximity of the initial direction to do that, the timeline to get that joint force and the plans approved, and this was, again, probably a soft-led, soft-centric mission because, again, it was based on Delta Force being that tip of the spear going in to make that arrest, along with an FBI appropriate, again, justice from that arrest warrant that the U.S. had. But, again, I think having the CIA have assets in country to get close enough to the president there to learn where his habits, his routines, the residents, having our national assets from space, being able to kind of do that one, because again, Delta Force had built a replica of that compound in Kentucky to practice rehearsals on getting in, getting out, on the security doors that had to blast through, to cut through. So they practiced that one, not to get it right, until they would never get it wrong. So that's the level that our Tier 1 Delta Force practices their kind of operations. And then on execution, because I understand weather's a main factor, the president had multiple residents. He's changing nights between, I think, 4, 5, or 6 different houses where he'd be staying. So they had to know when he was going to be at this specific house. They had to know that the weather was good. And I think by the time they had those conditions preset, it was a matter of hours to hit the trigger button to go. And then to have more than 150 U.S. aircraft coming from 20 different bases in the U.S. and ships at sea, all striking at the same time, is pretty impressive coordination and synchronization to get that done. And you probably can't name an aircraft that was not involved. We had F-35s, F-22s, F-16s, F-15s. You had the jammers. It was an impressive array of capability. Obviously, we were taking out some of the other military capabilities that would probably contend with our force. But also to see the lights go out across the whole Capitol. Talk about cyber operations on a mass scale. That worked well, and it cut a lot of their capabilities down very quickly. Because then you had the TF-160, the helicopters coming in with Delta Force, again, just above the buildings and above the tree line coming in to make that approach. And as we've heard little bits and pieces, they also had some sonic, non-lethal things that kind of helped, deter some people from engaging this force that, whether it knocked them out or just made them unaware of what's happening. But unfortunately, those force security guards that raised their weapons, they were targets, and they quickly died. But I think the force was on the ground for less than 30 minutes to get that one down, and within 3 hours, they were back on the ship with the arrest on that one. So it's an impressive capability to see that from space, cyber, joint force, CIA, the intelligence operations that was carried out. So you can rest peacefully tonight that, yep, that capability exists behind us, and that came through in relatively short notice. Let's hope that those in Iran kind of took notes of what happened here, and I'm sure China was also looking, wow, some of this electronic warfare technology and things that you bring, well, it's not about munitions. It's a pretty impressive capability. Here's the latest technology focus from SOCOM's Science and Technology Division within their acquisition center. Obviously, AI and machine learning is a priority, as well as unmanned technology to include air, surface, and underwater systems. Since SOF is joint by nature, they always focus on open systems architecture to quickly integrate new technologies into their networks. They're also working with the services to make sure that any SOF data is supported within that C4ISR architecture. SOCOM's FY24 total budget was $14 billion. That's less than 2% of the total Department of War's budget. For the other service perspective, the Navy's new Gerald Ford class carrier first ship cost was $13 billion. A new SSBN production cost is expected between $9 and $10 billion. The U.S. Air Force B-2 bomber cost around $2 billion when initially produced. And an Army THAAD missile battery is just under $2 billion. While all of these capabilities are important, I hope you can see the great value that our SOF provides for our nation. Unfortunately, SOCOM's budget has been flat in the past years, and that has reduced some of our global force deployments. Equally, after the Afghan drawdown, we lost a lot of our service providers. The U.S. Army specifically pulled back some of the enablers, the communications, the logistics, the intel that were critical to our SOF forces, so we lost some of that because we're not dependent on just our SOF force that SOCOM funds, but the services that provide those other capabilities to enable our task force. In today's as well as tomorrow's growing threat environment, SOF is always working to support national security priorities. They will continue to maintain the premier counterterrorism and core crisis response capabilities. SOF will quickly adapt to any new threats and be a value addition to our joint force to help prevent conflict through our strength, but also prevail and win when called upon. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to your questions and discussions.
Hey, Gary, let's pull those two chairs up, kind of out in the center here. So if you have questions, again, locate one of these cards. On the card also is the address that you can email questions to. It's ndbs.questions@gmail.com. And I'll start off with a couple of questions, and then we'll eventually get to the live Q&A. There we go. All right, they got the first question. You win $100. I'll write you a check. Okay, so you know your resume is really interesting, particularly the time as defense attaché in Abu Dhabi. What do you know? The big news for the last months has been the situation in Gaza. What's your crystal ball say about where that's going to go?
That's a very tough problem. I mean, granted, obviously Israel has gone in to address the Hamas threats that have threatened their national security. I think the Palestinian people have tragically paid for the Hamas's continued aggression against the Israelis. Even though there's a peace agreement, I think they are reluctant to lay down their arms. But unfortunately, I think even if we probably will never get rid of the Hamas, hopefully can kind of reduce them, and they will get tired of fighting and just allow at least the Palestine people the rebuilding of Gaza to at least some sort of semblance of normal living, to get aid, humanitarian things moving through all the borders with Egypt. I think will be key to that help. It's a tragic situation. I think it's probably not going to happen in our time, but again, getting to a two-state solution, which has been our kind of our standard theme by the United States and many to have a sovereign Palestine and with Israel is not going to happen in our generation. I think it's still a recognizable goal, but getting the Hamas to stop fighting it will be the key thing to lay down their arms.
There we go. Okay, so here's the first question card. Interesting question. I'm not sure you can comment on it. Said, did the U.S. have units on the ground in Caracas besides Delta?
I think they were the primary ones, obviously the helicopters that inserted them. We had the FBI agents that were there to support with the arrest proper. But I think the other targeting by the air power that was coming in was done remotely. So I tend to think that there was, other than the sources from the CIA that were there to kind of do the advanced collection on all that detailed intelligence required of the House and his pattern of life, was through those sources and the agents on the ground. But I think very limited, if any, beyond the initial Delta Strike Force to make that arrest.
Now, after the mission, the president commented on, he made a passing comment, really interesting. He talked about some sort of a special capability that he called the discombobulator. You know about the discombobulator?
I've never seen it, but I think it's just like we've seen the Russians in some of their things down, I believe, in Cuba, where they've kind of had these sonic waves that kind of over long periods will kind of help degrade other diplomats. But I do think that there's probably some of that capability. And the good news is it's hopefully non-lethal. It's not long-lasting. It's not going to kill you. So anytime we can do that one on a larger population, a large security force, and kind of put them out of the picture, that helps save their lives and reduces the blowback that we might be getting on any extraneous collateral damage if they're not there to respond. Just don't pick up your weapon. UBL noticed that one as well. The only people who died in the UBL raid were those that went to pick up his weapon, including his wife.
So you probably, like all of our forces, we try to train with our friends and allies, and I'm sure in your career you did that. Can you give us sort of, are there any other countries that have a special operations capability that's close to us? Maybe Israel? Any others?
I would think there's a number of countries, especially our Five Eyes partners. Israel, I think, with their special operations, their intelligence forces are incredibly powerful and capable. Again, our Five Eyes partners, you look at the UK, you look at Australia, you look at France. Those partners also have been doing counterterrorism for a long time. I think when you look earlier on, before when we had Desert One, the failure of the U.S. rescue of the Iranian hostages, we did not have a dedicated joint force, counterterrorism force to do that. We had individual services. We had Green Beret, we had Navy SEALs kind of stuff, but we didn't work all together. So that kind of drove it. But other forces, such as when the Olympics, the attack on the Israeli delegates there, again, you had those capable hostage rescue forces to be able to come and take care of that one. So I think they exist out there. Other forces are seeing that that's a great force to invest in. Granted, I would say most international partners spend the most in Air Force. So you've done well with your marketing on air power. But I think when you look at the investments in special operations forces, given the smaller density of people you need to do, granted specialized training, but you get that done and you can actually do impactful things with a smaller force to accomplish that one. I'm very proud of our folks. I was both at the SOCCENT deputy as well as the defense attaché in Abu Dhabi, the U.S. Embassy there, enabling our Emirati soft partners on the Presidential Guard, getting them into combat in Afghanistan and the coalition. They also fought with us in Yemen, going against some of the Al-Qaeda there. So I think they recognize that value of having that capability to provide that niche response.
Okay, we're going to take some questions from the audience, and there's our mic handler there. So if you have a question, just hold up your hand. He'll get you a mic. I've got a couple more. So it was a good rundown on the national defense strategy, and of course we were awaiting that. One thing that was missing in my view was any mention of Russia, which took second place in the last national defense strategy. It sounds like we're sort of tossing that over to the Europeans to handle internally. Where do you think we're going to go with the Russia-Ukraine thing? We're just going to keep hands off on that?
Again, with the continued deaths, I hope that there is a peace soon. But I think trying to get the agreements, sacrificing land, again, that's your sovereign territory, is tough to do. I think when you see other nations, look at how long can you afford to do this. When you look at some of the capabilities that have been sold and provided to Ukraine, we've had some of our NATO partners all of a sudden look around and say, well, where's my Patriot missiles? Because they start looking, and if their Patriots and our Patriots have all gone into supporting the Ukrainian defense, that kind of degrades some of the other capabilities around from our NATO partners. That's why I think you saw that other priority is reinvigorating the national defense industrial base. You saw recently where Lockheed Martin was awarded 4 times the THAAD response. L3 Harris, again, my old company I worked for, received $1 billion to help produce those rocket missile projections which are required for Patriots and THAAD. Granted, the government expects a partial share of that joint venture. We saw that with Intel. We're trying to increase our own domestic chip production. But again, with the U.S. government investment in Intel, we're also taking a share back on that one. So some of these innovative approaches to the defense industrial base to make sure that, one, we've got the capability to ramp up our own requirements in a conflict, but also maintain that supply for our allies and partners that need those and are using those, hopefully not on a daily basis.
I think there's a hand down here. You get a mic? Oh, just hang on, ma'am. Let's get a mic so we can hear the question. You have two young gentlemen fighting for your for you.
Okay. I think one of the major roadways to peace is to start calling Israel what it is, Israel, Samaria, Judea, all of Israel, and stop mislabeling the West Bank. There is no such thing. It's called Israel. Number one, when are we going to stop mislabeling all of Israel? And my other question is, as far as Israel has had many, the people who you call Palestinians have had many opportunities to have their own state. The one state, the 15th state, whatever state, all of Israel should be intact. And we're dealing with people who have a hell-bent intent to destroy all of Israel and the Jewish people. Here in Texas, we are ground zero with the most number of mosques of any other state is right here in Texas. And we all are familiar with the situation with EPIC and the proliferation of the Muslim who are here with their sole intent to bring Sharia law to Texas and the entire United States. What are your proposals?
I hope for a Palestinian solution, hopefully there's some more innovative ideas. Obviously, we've seen the success of the Abraham Accords, primarily with the UAE, Morocco, Sudan, and Bahrain, recognizing Israel back in 2020. To see the economic gains that UAE brought to that equation, I think is powerful. So I think trying to get, like, maybe if we can convince Saudi Arabia or Egypt or some of the others, we talk about Ukraine giving up land. Maybe some of the other Arab countries can find a place for a new Palestinian home to kind of take care of that sovereignty of Israel as well. I think on the mosques, obviously we support freedom of religion. Living in Abu Dhabi for 12 years. My initial diplomat house was in a large open compound. The community mosque was right behind us. I got used to the 5 prayers a day, and I think a lot of us can get some value by more time and thought in prayer, like the Muslims do, especially now during the holy month of Ramadan. To have that overlapping with the Lent and the sacrifices that they go through, so they understand the sacrifices of those. So I think Islam is not an aggressive religion. It's those terrorists that have hijacked their religion and politicized it, such as the Muslim Brotherhood, that are bringing that stress to the Middle East and around the world. That obviously brought up your question. I don't think there is a large Muslim Brotherhood push here in Texas. Again, I've just come back from after 12 years abroad, but I do hope that again, just as we assimilated into to Abu Dhabi as a foreigner, and when my parents or great-grandparents came over from Norway and Finland, we assimilated into the American society. So I think trying to build these separate clans, as we've seen up in Minnesota with say Somalia diaspora staying all so close, is challenging. So I think there should be more integration into the American society for all those that come to live here and call America home.
Okay, here's the elephant in the room. Good question. What do you think will happen in Iran?
Seen that a massive buildup that has been happening over the past couple weeks. Also, knowing and having, been in those commanders' conferences in the headquarters at CENTCOM when we looked at contingency planning, for Iran, it's probably going to happen sooner or later. Good news is, Admiral Brad Cooper, who is the CENTCOM commander, before that selection by President Trump and Senate confirmation, he was the deputy commander at CENTCOM. And before his 3 years as a deputy commander at CENTCOM, he was a NAV CENT commander in Bahrain. So he knows the Middle East, he knows Iran, he knows what we bring, he knows what Israel brings, he knows what Iran brings. So I think we couldn't ask for a better commander to be in charge of CENTCOM for what's amassing there and what could possibly be coming next. I do think, as the president has talked, they've got 10 to 14 days. Don't believe that schedule. As we learned last time, when we went to drop some, massive ordinator penetrators, on some key targets, I think that's going to happen sooner than later. I think keeping the having two carriers there is key. We've brought a lot of air forces in there, but the challenge is, and we work that all the time as diplomats and as those who live full time in the region, in the various component headquarters, is getting access and placement. So when our fighters fly in, can we actually go to this base that we've had there, the relationships that we have with that country, and use that country as a staging point for attacks into Iran? Some countries have said, nope, I'm not going to allow that. So bases we might have had are not there. Jordan, I think, has been a good basing for us now. You've seen even the UK. They have denied access to the U.S. to use Diego Garcia as a staging point for some of our bombers, a logical place to bring some of those long-distance things to do that. So that's been a little bit disappointing from the UK's perspective, though fortunately Italy has access to Crete. So we've got a lot of things staging there because this will be, you've got the assets to get there, you've got the resupply, so when they go to drop munitions, they got to come back and restock them, so, and then to get that working done. So that's why you've seen a lot more tankers coming in to make those refueling stops as we're now flying from longer distances, as we would if we could have access to all the bases with our partners in the Middle East.
Microphone up here, please. But let me ask a question while we're getting a microphone, Maureen. So you were the defense attaché in Abu Dhabi. What does a defense attaché do? What's their function in the government?
I was, as a defense attaché, you were the single DOD point of contact, DOW point of contact within that country team within the embassy. Again, I had two staffs. You got, they call it an SDO-DAT, the Senior Defense Official, slant Defense Attaché. So as the SDO, Senior Defense Official, my responsibility, had a staff for that one, but responsibility was back to CENTCOM to kind of make sure that we're doing capacity building, we're coordinating military exercises, we're coordinating, VIP meetings and delegations on that one. The other half, the attachés report to DIA, and they're doing the standard attaché duties of observing and reporting. They do the coordination with all the other attachés that are based there in the capital. It's an exciting thing, but it's also nice to have a single DoD voice within that country team. I work directly for the ambassador, and also that's who we report to, even though the fit reps are written through by the CENTCOM headquarters. But so it's a good relationship because I think before we had that SDO, that single point of contact, you would have sometimes the global combatant commander wanting to do this, but the DIA person said, nope, we need to be doing this one. So that's why we resolve those in advance, hopefully at that local level. If not, we need to go back to the higher headquarters. It was a great duty station. You learn more about all the other U.S. agencies that are working out of embassies, from commerce officers, agriculture officers, culture officers, and obviously interagency, teams inside there as well. So it's a pretty powerful team, and if you're ever traveling, especially doing business, I think you would certainly do well to connect with that embassy team as you go in to inject with those host nation forces, get some lay down, some insights and updates before you go knocking on that local industry or local government door.
I noticed today in the paper that the UN was going to send a great deal of money to Ukraine for their fight, and that Hungary and Slovakia are going to oppose that money being sent as long as the European countries will oppose export of oil from Russia. And I just wondered how Hungary and Slovakia, which are just two small countries relative to the others, could hold that money up.
I'm sure that's tied to the EU funds, because obviously the EU, everyone has a vote. They have that veto power as well.
But these are two countries.
But two countries. Obviously we've seen, that, I don't say obstructionist, but the dissenting vote and a number of other kind of EU things. NATO, I don't think, has that same restrictions on that one. But it has been good to see that NATO countries are buying our stuff from their funds and providing it to Ukraine instead of using U.S. Taxpayer dollars to send all of our own stuff into Ukraine.
So this is, Gary, it's a little bit out of your, maybe out of your area of expertise, but it's a great question. President Xi in China had just removed the number two, basically the head guy in the military, who was touted as his confidant and childhood friend, and now it's he and one other guy in the military council that used to be a 7-person body. What do you think the implications of that are for command and control of the Russian military, or excuse me, Chinese military?
I think he's looking to kind of get his new leadership structure in that one. Again, many of those have probably been there for years and years and years and decades. So we're trying to kind of think some new concepts and how they want to restructure their own military, how they would apply their military. Again, we've seen them, take a little more aggressive roles, building bases, building atolls, interjecting on the maritime front. Although I think when we ask about, okay, when's China going to Taiwan, if you go back to Russia and Ukraine, when Russia went into Crimea, it was little green men. And where was the uproar? I mean, did the UN, did all the world come together and say, stop, that's wrong? No. We kind of accepted it. So having that quiet takeover from little green men, probably special operations forces going in to take that country, that I tend to think that China looked at that operation vice when Russia rolls across the border with tanks. All of a sudden the whole world comes back after them. So I think for China to be thinking an active military attack on Taiwan, they've got the horizon, they got the long-term planning. I think they will be looking more at asymmetric and slowly working to get their own people in there, influence in there, and just do it on a non-kinetic, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and say, whoop, what happened? And I think that's the long game for China, vice a more active war that I think many of us obviously are preparing for, are trying to deter, as that NDS talks about peace through strength, but not through conflict.
Here's a topical question. Are special forces prepared to fight in the Arctic?
Yes. Even Navy SEALs are prepared to fight in the Arctic. Well, we've had our U.S. continental training bases. Even when I was a young operator, we had Kodiak, Alaska, as one of our cold winter training bases. Granted, when you kind of go from Alaska up to the even further north, you'll see that systems and equipment are not working. The batteries freeze up, systems freeze up, so it's a very challenging environment. I think to have again with Norway and Finland, again, joining NATO, I think we're seeing a lot more of our coalition, of our soft forces and military forces working together with those northern partners that live and breathe and work in that environment routinely. To look who won all the Olympics medals. U.S. was number 2, but those who live and breathe in snow and cold weather year-round, that's the partners we want to be working with. So yes, I think we understand our restrictions on that one. I think we see that the potential for conflict is there as ice melts. The Belt Road from China will be moving through there. Again, I think there'll be claims and minerals. There'll be obviously claims to, Greenland, how that can kind of help change the dynamics with that Nordic and Arctic environment. But I think, yes, the military is working on getting better prepared for that extreme cold weather operations, because we do think that's also a potential for the future. But it's hard and cold work. You think Texas winters are hot, or summers are hot, go the other extreme.
Okay, I've got about 3 more questions here. I'm going to turn to Scott in just a minute. Is this your last question? No, you got to wait for a minute then. Okay, so if there are other questions from the audience, I'll take those, but I'll throw these out. Again, this may not be in your wheelhouse, but so what do you think will be the final outcome of Diego Garcia?
That's tough when the UK gave up control of that one. I think the US is probably going to lose that as well. So how did we kind of replace that one? When you look at Pacific, when I was a young Frogman SEAL deploying, I was primarily Pacific, West Coast deployment, riding those ships across from San Diego all the way to dig at the Philippines. That challenge of the distance, and the tyranny of the distance is very hard. I mean, that's why I think when you look at first island chains, where we're going to stage, that's why you look at the long-range hypersonic weapons, where you're going to launch those from. So I think, but losing Diego Garcia will be a key loss for both the UK and for the US on that base there. Guam probably get a little busier. It's a stepping stone. But that's why I think working with our key partners and allies and making sure that the Philippines is with us, the Koreans and Japan is with us to help enable those who are in that neighborhood to kind of support us and take an active role in countering the China aggressions will be key.
What are the dangers to the region if the current rift between Saudi Arabia and the UAE worsens?
Oh, that's a good one. Because normally those kind of frictions between Gulf monarchs is generally kept quiet and internally. However, you've seen the UAE, especially with the Sheikh Mohammed, their new president, because they're flexing their national sovereignty and their national priorities with the work that they're doing in Sudan. There's key minerals that they want to get out of there. There's gold. They were working with the southern separatists in Yemen, which was counter to what Saudi was working against. So to have Saudi Arabia recently come in to strike a UE shipment to their partner force in Yemen, that kind of upset the course. Granted, UE's very quick. Okay, we'll stop doing it, at least publicly. But I think that it's some more quiet discussions. There's probably some covert resupply for some of their forces in there. Because it's on the UAE's border as well. It's not just the Saudi border, so both have got concerns on the ungoverned spaces, those dark spaces of Yemen down there, but they're multi-factions, from the STC, the Houthis, and trying to get some sort of, control. But I think UAE was pushing for a separation like we had in the past of North and Southern Yemen, where again, Saudi Arabia wants to keep that clear. They're not going to go to battle, and I think the good news, I think that unsigned letter was sent to the UE National Security Advisor, who's the president's brother, as opposed to from the king to the president levels. But it was, I think, just sending a message out there. But as we've seen earlier on when we had the quartet dispute, where you had UE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt, when Qatar, and primarily their Muslim Brotherhood, all their their Al Jazeera, friction that they were throwing out in the region. So those powerful quartet kind of came in, and they had that blockade for, I think, about 4 years, where you pretty much isolated Qatar. You drove them to work closer with Turkey. You also work closer with Iran. Hence, you see some restrictions from working out of Qatar for strikes in Iran, given that dynamic that we did on that. So I think, but it took time, took years, but it eventually healed. But there's probably an underlying stress. So, but good question. Thanks for keeping up for that view, even from Texas.
Well, here's another good question. So one of the fourth pillar of the National Defense Strategy is to supercharge the defense industrial base. So you've had a long perspective as both a user of that stuff that comes out of the defense industrial base and as a businessman that helps supply it. How do you think we fix that? What do we need to do to supercharge it?
I think looking at the acquisition system, again, it takes too long. I mean, not just for our own systems, but also for international partners. The FMS program is way too long to get the technology reviews, to get that approved and get it in the pipeline. I also think the Pentagon is looking at how we can change that. You're seeing some senators, I'm seeing discussion, when you look at $14 billion for one carrier, where Chinese can spit out, multiple times a number of ships, but it's not the high-low mix. So do we need the premier, the strategic, massive, and very expensive platforms that we continue to build, the carriers, the ballistic missile submarines, the strategic bombers, or can we get by with something short of that, but in larger quantities? So that goes back to your concept on, how do you expect to fight that war? Is it going to be a war of attrition? And then how is the growth of AI and unmanned systems going to change that architecture? I'm sure there's a lot of ship skippers out there in the Middle East now thinking about drones, surface drones, air drones, hypersonic missiles, and how do you defend against those for these premium high-value platforms versus these low-cost attack systems that are out there. And they continue to proliferate, but trying to build defensive for those is a much harder solution, because every time you build defense, someone works around it. So I think hopefully directed energy will be a quick solution for some of these swarm attacks that might be coming at our forces. But I think as we should realistically look, when you consider how much we spend on our defense procurement budget, can we afford to continue to do that without relooking at our force structure and our balance of high, low mix while still getting the best technology?
Okay, I'm going to turn to Scott in just a minute. I want to add one thing to your presentation. Your slide on the first people on the ground in Afghanistan, actually the first people on the ground was a CIA team.
I said military. I was close, but
I got it.
I know, you know, as your former agency toured, you wouldn't have a PowerPoint slide anyway, so.
Scott, do you have a question?
I do. You mentioned the Olympics just a short time ago and how refreshing it was over the last couple of weeks to sit and watch the Olympics. And when the Americans won a medal, you'd see people from China or Taiwan or France or wherever it might have been come over and give them a hug and say congratulations. It was so refreshing to see all these different countries from all over the world when it came to sports, and it came to that they all supported each other even though they came up on the short end. And it made me think, what is the message that you might share with all of us? You've given just some incredible, the two of you have had a great conversation here for the last 30 minutes. So I just wondered, as we leave here, every single one of us, it doesn't matter whether we're liberal, we're conservative, forget all that. We're all citizens of the United States of America. You talk about Kuwait, you talk about Israel, you talk about Iran, you've talked about China and Russia, and it doesn't matter what it is. What is the thing that concerns us most, that is the takeaway that we should go out the door and share with our friends and our family and the people in our community about what you, who's dealing with this every single day, what is your biggest concern? When you put your head on the pillow tonight, what are you going to be thinking about? The good old US of A, and what we all should be concerned about, and what we all might be able to do to move forward in a positive, productive way to make our world the way it was at one time.
I'm very happy, one, to see the youth here with us tonight, because I think the future of us depends on those willing to volunteer, to serve our nation, to do that. Because again, so much, when I talk to my fellow colleagues, you know, unless your parents served in the military, your grandparents served in the military, and that generation is just skipping. So again, hopefully we've got those who have no connection, family with the military, signing up to say, yes, send me, here I am, as we hear in Isaiah. But I think having that force structure behind us, having the best technology that the U.S. leads the world in and continues to lead the world in is refreshing. Then from the soft perspective, you know, someplace in the world today, there's a probably SEAL slipping over the boat into the water. There's a Green Beret jumping out of an aircraft. There's an AFSOC gunship dropping a round on a target, one round, direct hit. And there's a MARSOC Raider out there on patrol. But chances are you will never hear about them, because then we are the quiet professionals. But the good news is that they are out there every day, every night, around the clock, protecting us along with our joint force. So I think you'd be incredibly proud of our special operations forces and our joint force overall, and well as, you know, the capabilities we bring to protect America, that we can sleep soundly tonight, because I'm not going to lose any sleep. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That was super.